Today's chapter of the Palace Papers is titled The Duke of Hazzard, Andrew's Money Pit. And if you thought Prince Andrew's public disgrace was all about Epstein, you haven't even scratched the surface. Tina Brown pulls no punches in this scorched earth expose of a man who went from war hero to national embarrassment. From ironed bedsheets in luxury hotels to Kazakhstan oligarchs with fat wallets, Andrew's downfall is both jaw-dropping and darkly comic. Let's get into it. Prince Andrew was outraged. It was May 2011, and Scotland Yard had informed him that his two daughters, Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice, fifth and sixth in line to the throne respectively, were to be stripped of their 24-hour police protection after rising tensions about the £500,000 annual whammy to the taxpayer. Andrew had fought ferociously to keep his girls' security detail. His rationale was that with HRH before their names, they should be treated accordingly, but he found himself on brittle ground. So Andrew wants round-the-clock taxpayer-funded protection for two club-hopping 20-somethings, while the rest of Britain is being told to tighten belts? The Queen, in her pragmatic wisdom, said, "Get a job." Andrew said, "Get a lobbyist," even went as far as pulling aside Tory MP Hugo Swire for a drink and a favor. Desperate isn't even the word. A year later, Andrew had further reason to feel snubbed. Shortly before he boarded the number 2 barge, an insult in itself, at the Diamond Jubilee River pageant, he learned that he and his daughters had been cut from the iconic royal photo finish on the Buckingham Palace balcony. Nor were they on the list for the lunch for 700 dignitaries at Westminster Hall just beforehand. It couldn't have been fun for Andrew to hear from staff that he hadn't made the cut and know the decision would have been run by his mother. Another guest on the follow-up barge heard him whinging noisily about it with Sophie Wessex, whose invite was also lost in the mail. Nothing says royal relevance like a photo op, so getting cut from the Jubilee balcony shot, that's a royal burn. Even the balcony had been put on a diet. The Queen, Charles, Camilla, William, Kate, and solo Harry. That's it. Andrew, meanwhile, was demoted to the second barge, literally and figuratively. The Queen discusses the family allocations of the sovereign grant with her keeper of the privy purse. The way she doles it out is remarkably personal. Members of the family wait in trepidation to hear if they are going to get a raise. The Queen meets annually with the Chancellor of the Exchequer alone, at a small table in her second-floor receiving room with the corgis running around, and produces a piece of paper on which she has written her list. Often she will make irreverent asides about how people have performed. The Duke of Kent will get $550,000 and Wren House to use. The Wessexes should get another 200. Sophie really is trying. Ix is hopeless with money and hardly does anything. I think 50 will do, etc. The Chancellor scribbles away and takes the list back to the Treasury, which handles royal finances, and the funds are transferred to Buckingham Palace. Tina Brown paints this incredible picture of the Queen running her family finances like a private HR review, with irreverent asides and a list on her notepad. You can imagine Andrew waiting to hear if he's been bumped up or quietly sidelined with the deadweight cousins. As the UK's special representative for international trade and investment, a role that allowed him to swan around the world at government expense playing golf, Andrew was the despair of the British Foreign Office. He insisted on flying private and traveled with an entourage of servants, including a valet who lugged a preposterous 6-foot-long ironing board through the lobby of 5-star hotels. He described his travel expenses as a little tiny spot in the ocean by comparison to many people. But that didn't stop the criticism, or the prince's profligacy. The Daily Telegraph reported that in 2010, the Duke of York had spent £465,000 on flights and £154,000 on food and hotels on his trade missions. He's not just tone-deaf, he's theatrical about it. Who travels with a personal ironing board? Who brags that the criticism is just a little tiny spot in the ocean? His international jaunts weren't diplomacy, they were royal cosplay on the taxpayer dime. In a questionable transaction typical of Prince Andrew's business affairs, his white elephant house Sunninghill Park was sold in 2007 to Nazarbayev's baby-faced billionaire son-in-law Timur Kulibayev for £3 million more than its £12 million asking price, even though there were no other bids on the property. This was doubly puzzling to the press because the only enhancements to the house since the York's occupation was a new zoning designation under the direct flight path for incoming aircraft at Heathrow Airport. There were so many questions from the press that the palace felt compelled to protest. The sale of Sunninghill Park was a straight commercial transaction between the trust, which owned the house, and the trust, which bought it. There were no side deals, and absolutely no arrangement from the Duke of York to benefit otherwise or to commit to any other commercial arrangement. Any suggestion otherwise is completely false. You don't need a financial analyst to smell something shady here. The house was under Heathrow's flight path and barely habitable, so why overpay by millions? Oligarch real estate laundering, royal edition. In February 2011, the New York Post published a picture taken the previous December of Andrew strolling in Central Park with the American financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew appeared to have resumed the friendship with this squalid individual 5 months after Epstein was released from a Florida jail for procuring a child for prostitution and soliciting a prostitute. These revelations were compounded by news in the Telegraph that in 2009, when Fergie had been skirting dangerously close to bankruptcy, Epstein, at Andrew's request, had given money to one of her personal assistants to satisfy a paltry debt of £15,000. This was the moment the public stopped laughing and started cringing. It's not just tone deafness, it's moral vacancy. Andrew didn't just pal around with Epstein, he leveraged him. Epstein paid off Fergie's debts, and Andrew thought nobody would notice. He peaked at age 22 when, on September 17, 1982, he strode down the gangplank from the battleship HMS Invincible in Portsmouth Harbor with a red rose between his teeth after acquitting himself with honor as a Sea King helicopter pilot in the Falklands War. The Queen and Prince Philip and Princess Anne were there to greet him. Jubilant crowds swarmed the Royal Naval Dockyard waving Union Jacks. Nobody called him Randy Andy, a prince whose only claim to fame was his preference for blue-eyed blondes, one tabloid noted. Now it's Andrew the Warrior Prince, a hero home from the wars. By the time he went to Gordonstown, he knew that for all the palaces he lived in and the servants who served him, he was the second son whose childhood parody with Charles was a mirage. Only the monarch's firstborn wakes up every morning, knowing that to advance to the ultimate prize, all he has to do is stay alive. Only the firstborn son is invested as Prince of Wales. Only the firstborn son becomes the Duke of Cornwall, which includes being handed a vast private estate that generates around $30 million in annual income. The only certainty for the second son is that as the years go by, his importance will decline as he slides inexorably down in the line of succession. This is where Tina Brown flips the lens from scandal to tragedy. Andrew's entire adult life has been an existential sulk. The second son, the forgotten one, the man who peaked at 22. His humiliating fall is a cautionary tale for the generations, as we now know only too well. Prince Andrew's descent isn't just about bad choices, it's about a system that props up its worst actors until they become too toxic to touch. This chapter gives us the anatomy of a royal meltdown, petty entitlement, global sleaze, tabloid disasters, and the sad theater of faded glory. Next chapter, we dive further into the Epstein saga, what attracted Prince Andrew to this person, and the media scandals that followed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next chapter.